Hello everyone, today is day 9 of solving a LeetCode question every day. So today we're solving longest consecutive sequence. So this is another medium problem. So given an array of integer nums, return the length of the longest consecutive sequence of elements. So as you can see here, basically what a consecutive sequence of elements means is you have to have elements that go in order, so each element is exactly one greater than the previous element, but the actual order or the placement of where the elements are in the array doesn't matter. So in this case the output is 4 is because we have 2, 3, 4, and 5, and in this case it's 7 because we have 0 and we have a 1 here, we have a 2, 3, 4, and 5. So it says we must write an algorithm that runs in linear time. The constraints are the length of the nums array is going to be between 0 and 1000 inclusive, and this is just a constraint on how large each integer could be. So yeah, let's get straight to the solution. So how can we answer this question in linear time? I'm going to start out by saying that I actually solved this in n log n time, and the way I did that was by sorting this entire array, then finding the longest consecutive sequence in that way. But let's get straight into solving this in linear time. The first thing you want to do is convert the nums array into a num set. Once you do that, you also want to initialize the longest variable that you will output at the very end. We just initialize this to 0. What we're then going to do is iterate through this entire num set. In each iteration, what we're going to do is have an if statement, and what we're going to do is going to check if this current element's previous element, which what I mean by previous is previous on the integer scale, so like does 2 minus 1 exist in this set? So in this case 2 minus 1 is 1, and 1 is not in this set. Since the condition was true, we're going to go ahead and initialize length to 1. So what we're going to do next is check if the next elements exist in the list. So what I mean by that is we start out at 2, then we do 2 plus length, and it exists in the array since we have a 3 here. So now we want to increment length to 2. We then check if 2 plus length is also in the array. So 2 plus 2 is 4. We see that 4 is in the array. We then increment length to be 3. Now again, we check if 2 plus length exists in the array, which is 5, and it does. We increment length again to be 4 now. And now we check if 4 plus 2 exists in the array, and it doesn't. So we set the longest to be 4, and now we move on to the next element. So does the element previous to 20 exist in the array? No, it doesn't. So we're going to initialize length to be 1, and again, we check if 20 plus length exists within the array, and it doesn't. So now we can go to the next element. Now, does 4 minus 1 exist in the list? It does. 3 is over here, so we can skip 4. Now we do the same thing with 10. But if you notice, 10 plus 1 doesn't exist in the array, so we can skip 10. So if we keep going, we're pretty much going to find out that 4 was the longest sequence in this array. So let's get to coding the solution. So the first thing we're going to do is convert the nums array to be a set. Next, we're going to initialize the longest variable to be 0. We then loop through each integer in the num set. We now check if the n-1 element is not in the num set. If n-1 is not in the num set, we initialize length to be 1. We then initialize a while loop that will keep incrementing length while n plus length is in the num set. Finally, we set longest to be the larger value between length and the current value for longest. We then just return longest. The reason why this algorithm runs in linear time is we actually only process each element in the array once. We have a condition here that says if n-1 is not in the num set. That means all this code here will only execute if n-1 is not in the num set. So what we're essentially doing here is running this code for each individual sequence that exists within the array. What the while loop here does is processes all the elements within that specific sequence. So we're only actually processing each element once. Finally, let's submit the code. There we go. That's my solution for the day.